नायमात्मा प्रवचनेन लभ्यो न मेधया न बहुना श्रुतेन यमेवैष वृणुते तेन लभ्यस्तस्यैष आत्मा विवृणुते तनु भूस्वाम् नायमात्मा प्रवचनेन लभ्यो न मेधया न बहुना श्रुतेन यमेवैष वृणुते तेन लभ्यस्तस्यैष आत्मा विवृणुते तनु भूस्वाम्. This Atman is not attained through pravachanena, through discourse, nor through medhaya, intelligence, na bahuna shrutena, any amount of listening. So get this right. The Atman is not attained through giving discourses, through any amount of intelligence, nor any amount of listening. So you all can stop doing what you're doing. Don't waste your time. Na ayam atma pravachanena labhya. Na labhya is not attained. It is attainable to him who seeks it. Yameva, eva alone, vrunute, labhya. Vrunate means seeking. Labhya is attainable. Tasyaisha atma vivrunate tanu goswam. To him, this Atman reveals its true nature, the true tanum. Tanum means nature. Atma vivrunate. The self or the Atman reveals swam, its own true nature. So the Atman or the self is not attainable by delivering spiritual discourses. So if any one of you are having any intention of becoming a guru to start teaching, please remember this. Pravachanena labhya. Because the moment we learn, first thing we do is we start lecturing. Na labhya. Self is not attained by delivering spiritual or scriptural discourses, nor if you're well versed in scriptural literature, very intelligent, very sharp, very smart, you are able to rattle off the Vedic shlokas, or you are blindfolded, you can read backward forwards. Nah. Or you are very diligently listening to scriptural discourses. Why does he say the self is not attainable through that? Because per se, all these three will give you only an objective knowledge, will only give you an objective perspective of the self. It's only information. So there is a difference between objectively seeking the knowledge vis-a-vis subjectively experience it. So if you take it in that sense, these exercises per se has no meaning. So don't log out yet. Huh? Still log on. Now, when do they become objective? When do they become per se meaningless exercise? When they don't serve the objective. So the objective here, I've used the word objective twice. The first time I've used objective knowledge means theoretical. Second time when I'm using, they become useless if they don't serve their objective. The second time when I use the word objective means it must serve the purpose. So how should one approach all these mentioned practices? In particular, what is mentioned in the mantra, or in general, any spiritual sadhana, any sadhana, how should one approach it? As it is said, when we approach it as a means to an end, when we approach any spiritual practice as a means to an end, they serve the purpose. Then they have a place in the journey. But if they are approached as an end in itself, they serve no purpose. So when you approach either listening to a discourse or discoursing or being intelligent, you're trying to do a comparative study. Oh, there are so many commentaries on a particular mantra. There are so many perspectives. In fact, the second half of the mantra, there is a different perspective. How the Advaita school of thought and how the Dvaita school of thought give an interpretation. Whose interpretation is right? Why do you want to get into a comparative study? Why do you want to get into mere dissection of these scriptures without any greater purpose? So the ultimate objective should be everything should serve as a means to an end. If it doesn't serve as a means to an end, then they become mere objective experience. So therefore, the most important thing that is required while we are practicing all these practices, what is the most important thing that is required? As we learn, these practices by itself are meaningless. What is the most important thing that's required? AM. AM is Amitama.
Hariom sir, good morning. The only thing that is required to make it applicable and convert knowledge to wisdom is reflection, contemplation.
That is not my question. You all have stereotyped questions, is it?
Sorry, sir.
You think your guru will not ask any other questions other than the stereotyped questions, stereotyped answers? What is the question, AM?
What is required if it is not to be adopted as an end in itself? This study of the scripture.
Is that the question, JM? I'm confused. And the Gayatri Ma, what's the question?
What is the most important thing required for making that objective knowledge into a subjective knowledge, not to reach the goal, objective that should serve it?
In the sense, yes. What if these practices per se are, as the mantra says, will not get you to the self, then what is the most important thing? So these per se are redundant or useless without that essential element, right? So what makes this relevant is that essential element in it. So the question is, what is that most essential thing that is required? Without which these practices you and I may be doing, and you'll not get to it means you'll not grow spiritually. They will become mere academic and objective information, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So it's the application of intellect.
Subjectively, but
and reflection, subjective reflection to our daily application to real life.
Tell Sinha to practice maunam until he is asked for. Please maintain maunam.
Miss
How could we hear you? You're saying sitting opposite each other or what?
Yes, sir. We are in the same room.
I could gather that. No, it's not the intellect. It's not a thought. See, sometimes you need to strike the same chord of the or the wavelength of the question. I think you're not striking the chord
Yes, sir. Yeah.
because you have not done any warm up. You're directly got into the match. No preparation. Lack of preparation is obviously noted. Ramji, what is the most important thing here?
Hariom, sir. I think basically what this says is that all these are not going to help you unless you really seek the Atman, unless you are really having that strong desire to reach the Atman. That is purely from the shloka or from the mantra, I'm saying.
It is there. Actually, the answer is there in the mantra itself.
Yeah.
Can we have the translation once again, Ma? Because the second half of the mantra, the first line, he says, Yeme Vaisha Brunate Tena Labhya. It is attainable to him alone who seeks it. Vrunate. The question is, in spite of you doing the sadhana, in spite of you listening to scriptural discourses, in spite of you gaining intelligence of the Shastras, means information of the Shastras, are you really seeking the essence what the Shastras are giving, which is the Atman? If you don't seek it, it is not attainable. But to one who seeks it, the Atman reveals itself. Now, genuinely, if we ask ourselves, Ramji, if I ask you, are you genuinely seeking the Atman?
Not yet.
I want to say, don't make it personal, but I'm just trying to say.
No, I'm saying in general, everybody.
Yeah. To be able to have that clarity of the self as the, I like that use, the purpose and purpose of life. To have that as that objective of life. It is quite, you must do enough sadhana that thought of the self replaces every other thought. There is no other interest but the thought of the self. That is very, very lofty goal. In fact, the highest goal a human being can conceive is self-realization. So to think of self-realization as the goal is the most important thing. So without that end in mind, all the means is no use, isn't it?
So that does it mean that to seek Atman, you don't have to do any of these things, or you have to do these things as by doing these things you will reach a point, a tipping point, when you will actually switch to seeking Atman?
No. In fact, when you seek the Atman, all these practices make it relevant.
Right.
The relevance of these practices or the practices becomes far more optimal, and it produces the results because these practices take you to the self.
Correct.
But without the goal in mind, if you do it, what is the purpose? It becomes mere academic, isn't it? Oh, I've heard this Swami talking of the Upanishad. I want to hear this man of what he says. I would like to hear how that man criticizes and who this man. What are we getting into? Unnecessary comparative study. One of the advices I remember Swamiji gave us In general, he used to tell, when I'm teaching this knowledge to you all, and those of you who would want to propagate this knowledge, I don't want you to become professors of philosophy. You get this, sir?
Yeah.
What is the difference between becoming a professor of philosophy vis-a-vis a spiritual seeker? What is the difference?
The first one is dissemination of knowledge, and the second one is actually practicing the essentials of seeking.
One who is just parroting in the best of institutions the world over. And I don't want to name a person. And I had met, Ramji knows that person. I had met a gentleman in a very reputable institution, a man who every day teaches this in the management institution. And through known referrals, we went to meet him so that this knowledge could find a way to reach the management students there. It was very promising meeting. And in that meeting, the man literally told me, Guruji, you will not have time for yourself. You will have, your calendar will not be with you, because I have calls from Harvard, I have calls from Cambridge, I have calls for doing these programs in that university, and we will collaborate and we will go here, we'll go there and do that. For a moment, I was very afraid, Ramji. To be frank with you, when he said I'll have no time for myself, I was very afraid. I said, jab hoega dekhenge, you know, when it happens, we'll see. But he literally said this, your calendar will not be, you will not be free. You will be running from university to university. People are clamoring. They want this knowledge. They want this thing. And I could, and then later on, I could justify empty vessels were making a lot of noise.
Sir, we used to have a professor who used to take classes on interpersonal relations. IPR it was called, interpersonal relations.
IPR, right?
IPR. And on the campus, he never got along with anybody.
That is icing on the cake.
Correct. So teaching is very different from practicing. So
they're completely different ball game, you know.
But Guruji, what I was trying to get at is that suppose there is an ordinary person who is working hard morning to evening for his family, and then he's making both ends meet. Let's assume that he is a workman in a factory or whatever. So he doesn't have access to any of these things, right? Can he still attain Atman? Can he still? I mean, I'm just trying to see that is this an elitist practice, or is it something which a common man can actually practice and still attain Atman?
So it is not limited to the literate.
Yeah.
Anybody can seek it. As we have rightly said, as you rightly clarified, what is essentially needed is, are you seeking the self?
Right.
So what is important for spiritual practice is the availability of the mind. When we say, are you seeking the self? The question is your mind available for the higher? Now, most of our minds are preoccupied with worldly activities. Let's be upright. We are quite preoccupied. We are unable to pull the mind out of our preoccupation. And we find a reason that we want to occupy our mind there. To that extent, you don't have the vairagya.
Yeah.
So if a person who could be an ordinary man in the streets, but he genuinely seeks the self, means he's interested in the higher good, the larger good of his own good, is very much attainable. Because I may not be a man of words, but I can be a man of wisdom, no?
Yeah.
Wisdom is not associated with words. In fact, wisdom is extracted from the words. That's one of the ways. So we also advise, don't get caught up in the word. That's what even the verse is saying. Don't get caught up in the literary discourses or the literary text. It is mere academic. It's just objective knowledge. So the only objective of all the sadhana is to make the mind mature, right? The result is the transformation of the mind. The mind must be pure. The mind must be, in fact, the next, I think in the fourth or one minute, in which mantra I'll tell you. In the fifth mantra, he's going to say that. He says the mind must be contented. There he uses the word jnana truptaha. Here he's content with wisdom. Now our minds are not contented because we don't have the wisdom. So our minds are immature, running behind the world, believing that all other activities, the various activities, is going to give you that peace or contentment. So our search is elsewhere. So immature mind is never contented. A matured mind is contented. So if one achieves that objective, and there are various ways one can achieve that, everybody can pursue it. No?
Okay.
Yes, Hariji. I hope your question is not academic.
Guruji, when we say that seeking, is it same as mumukshutva? Or they are different?
See, mumukshutva is a burning desire to get to the self. It's one and the same thing.
It is the same.
We can say it.
Okay.